Steve, you've got the agenda, so-called, that we've all seen. Took me all weekend to read it, and I fell asleep several times. No, I should. Would you go ahead and let's start dealing with it?
Yes, so I'm going to put a very loose agenda in the chat because there's no written agenda for like the whole public to see. 3 parts. We'll start with reopening. 3 parts of reopening: a brief overview, Q&A, discussion, and let's say let's get real. Let's call it that. Let's get real, and then finances, and then enrollment. So that's our meeting. So brief overview. I'll share the family version and share my screen. This is something we sent out to families last week. So just give me a second here. We are going along currently with the governor's, I guess, prediction that we will be able to open partly in the fall on site and have a portion of our kids learning at home and a portion of our kids learning on campus. We'll discuss the complications of that in a moment, but this is what we are plan A currently at this moment planning, and that could change any minute. And our decision was to do a week by week on campus schedule. So if you're in group 1, then you're on campus.
Steve, may I interrupt on one point before you continue? Is this your preference among the 2 choices, between the 2 choices?
Meaning remote or hybrid?
Yes.
I don't have a preference.
Okay.
That's me personally. I mean, as a school, we have the choice, but there is no good plan.
Okay. Continue, please.
So you're on for a week. When you're on campus, you're not here on Fridays. Fridays are all remote for a couple of reasons. One reason is it gives the entire community a chance to at least be together virtually, since they can't be together as a class on campus. And this on campus assumes all of the safety precautions, which we'll get into in the next section of our meeting, that we'll be able to scrub down surfaces, keep everybody distant and masked, isolate anybody who may be ill, shut down swiftly if we do have a case that happens, which we haven't officially said that's the policy. We haven't heard that yet, but that was true in March and when this all started. So assume the campus is safe. If the campus is not safe for whatever reason, then we're all remote. Like, that's number one. Whatever the implications are of that, the challenges, the childcare, the mental health needs, if we can't guarantee that when a person, adult or child, comes in the building, they're not going to be protected, then we can't be on campus. So just some of the things that we've promised or told families and that we're working on. This essentially here, Focus on Safety, is our plan for keeping the building safe. And board members have seen the more detailed version of it. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment in the Q&A. So I'm going to go through each of these little areas and how they've shifted in the past week, because things are changing day by day. The chancellor continues to say that this is the city's plan. You don't have to follow the city's plan. Under the governor's guidance, assuming that we're even allowed to open at all on campus, which we'll find out next week, and it does seem like we will be able to because the numbers are there, we have the choice of being all remote or the hybrid. So if we are doing blended learning, which is what we're calling it, we will check temperature when people come in. We will rearrange the building so that you can't be, you won't cross anyone in the hallways if you're a child. There'll be very few, if any, visitors. You won't be going to the cafeteria. You won't be going to the art room. You won't be going to the gym. You'll stay in your room. You'll eat lunch in your room. You'll eat breakfast in your room, all the stuff. We'll be buying and distributing masks, and we'll be a small supply of other things too. Face shields for people who can't wear masks, gowns for people who are caring for anybody who's in an isolation room, and so on. And we've The first I've heard of the DOE doing anything specific is on the radio this morning. The mayor said there are going to be hand washing stations everywhere, which is great to hear, because I keep asking our custodian, what's the latest, and there's no information's been given to the buildings at this point. Laura, if you have any inside information, it's been almost impossible for me to get information about what they're planning specifically. Please let us know.
And
absolutely, they've been pretty hush-hush, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that's not reassuring.
We've been doing the family engagement sessions, as you know. We're hosting another one tomorrow night, but it's just pretty general. I think most of the public focus right now is just on talking about the different models that are available, and then how schools should go about choosing from the models. But I haven't heard very much about the specifics around how to I guess outfit the school with all of these safety measures.
Yeah, I think that's the whole game. I mean, there's no good plan in terms of the splitting up the groups, but there are elegant solutions, and they're very context dependent. It's learning about what families need. It's making accommodations to the extent that we can without throwing everything into chaos, and it's making good groups that we can keep consistent. So there's predictability. On the right-hand side of your screen, the virtual school supports. So we are preparing as if we may have to be all remote at some point, and we will be on Fridays. And so we've taken what we did in the spring, which we thought was very successful, and we're ramping it up by adding more time, more features, more focus on the academic work and on the social emotional learning, which was more of a non-curricular thing. It was more of a check-in and then follow up. We're going to be teaching our social emotional curriculum during the week, which we did not do virtually. The communication, we got high marks on our surveys for keeping families up to date. It slowed down quite a bit this summer. We don't do weekly blasts because we're in the summer, but we'll be going back to that again. And our communications team, which didn't exist before the pandemic, is ready to go for the fall. And then, of course, technology, which is going to be an issue. We need to buy more machines. We're on back order. We're back in the same situation where everyone in the world is buying Chromebooks, and they can only mine so much lithium from the few mines where they make these things. I'm making that up, but I know there's a backlog. We have here the first day is Wednesday, September 2nd. We'd like to keep to that. Another problem is that we can't get answers about when we can even be in the building to start setting up. Success went all remote because they said they can't get into the building at all until September 10th. I don't think that's true, but they may have been told somehow they can't open until September 10th on campus. We have not been told that. We haven't been given a date or a process by which we can start setting up classrooms. But we hope to open Wednesday, September 2nd. And if we can't do that with our blended plan, we will probably do that with our remote plan. That's the basic overview. Down here we have all the the caveats, which basically says we're ready to go to remote if we need to, because things need to be safe.
Laura, do you have any insight into this building question, which seems like the most absurd part of all this? I mean, you should be able to set up a plan where you say we're going to clean the buildings by such and such. I realize that.
Right. I mean, at this point, they are opening buildings, but you have to do like a special request. You have to document it with, I guess, operations. So there are some options as far as entering the building, but it has to be very well communicated, and there's like a whole sign up feature.
Yeah, that's been true all summer. It's not the same thing as us knowing when can we start, moving furniture.
Have you made those steps, those applications, Steve?
Whenever we need to, yeah. If someone needs to go in, someone can go in. We haven't had that problem. It's more about when can 15 teachers go in and start setting up under the guidance of a administrator, start setting up classrooms, which we wouldn't want to do yet, but we want to know that we can do it on X date in August.
Right, I understand.
Okay, so Q&A time. Unless anybody on this call who's been involved in the planning wants to add anything to what I've said for the overview.
I think it's quite precise and good.
Okay. So Q&A from anybody in the community, starting with board members. And Pete, you had a chance to review the draft of the SUNY document.
Well, as I said, I fell asleep several times. No, it seems fine to me. Everything is so fluid, is a kind term to use. I had no significant criticism. You know, a few periods of commas here or there, but it was essentially a struggle to try to write about a situation that's out of this world.
The hardest part of the writing is that are the parts that are where we are dependent on the DOE because we don't have information, and certainly for cleaning, for use of certain rooms, that's all preliminary right now in this draft. And to be fair, the authorizers all understand that this is quickly changing and is very variable and iterative. So we're not submitting a final plan July 31st, which is when half this document is due. We're submitting a proposal, and the expectation is we're going to keep updating it, and we're going to keep changing the draft based on the information that comes out.
This is an odd question, I admit, but why is some of this due on July 31st and the other part of it's due on August 12th or whatever the other date is?
I think all the deadlines are arbitrary, but originally the whole thing was due July 31st, and SUNY itself had a glitch in their website, and they had to pull it down, and people who didn't access it right away lost it, so they gave them more time to do the academic parts.
And Steve, have you started to take into account if you start hybrid and then with influenza season or any of the other major pitfalls that could happen, that you're ready to pivot quickly and as efficiently as possible?
Yeah, we've been talking that way the whole time. There are a laundry list of reasons, or there is a laundry list of reasons why we might have to quickly go remote. And there's nothing written in the plan right now specifically, but that's the impulse here. Is everything is built around blended learning with the knowledge that it may be a question of if and not when, and how quickly can we just get right on to all being remote. The biggest challenge will be making sure that we have good schedules where we can get teacher roles clear, because the teacher roles have to be so specific for the blended plan. You've got different teachers who are in different grades, different numbers of them can be on campus at a given time because of their own health and family reasons. You've got people who are leading a small group who are, doing that X times a week, and others who are there all the time. You've got people who are doing only remote learning as a teacher. You've got teachers who are responsible for a whole grade team for remote lessons. I mean, this is the kind of stuff I anticipate happening. We haven't made the detailed schedule yet. And then when we go back to all remote, it'll be, or if we do that, it'll be people will have more roles, more like they had in the spring, where there's a couple of point people for different things per grade, and then each co-teaching team leads their section. But we have to think about even co-teaching teams right now a little bit more fluidly and differently than we would have in the spring because of all these variables.
And if there's an urgent transfer from blended to all virtual, are you confident that you can disseminate that to the families fast enough that half the people don't show up the next morning at school?
We have a snap communications team. I mean, they've been on things, very consistently.
And the parents have been online. Or they pick it up.
Snapping. I think there are a couple of parents, literally a couple, that have been very hard for us to reach on a consistent basis. But for the most part, because we do multi-channel communications, we do robocalls, we have the Remind app, we do social media, we do email, we're able to hit everybody.
Okay. Would there be somebody at school the next day in that sort of scenario that would say, go home?
I don't know. I mean, there'd be somebody from the DOE there. I don't know if there'd be anybody from our school. It depends on what the reason is.
Okay.
I had a quick question about the UFT. I know that the teachers unions in Los Angeles and San Diego were a big part of them closing for the fall. And I was wondering if anybody's heard anything from the UFT about their position on reopening. And then even though we're not members of the UFT, if that would influence, if the DOE does close as a result, if that would influence our reopening.
I haven't heard anything. UFT to me has been quiet. Anybody else? I think the UFT is, I think they're walking the line. You know, I've seen the AFT come out and support blended learning, but only with the priority on safety, like we're talking. And the UFT pretty much mirrors the AFT's party line. It used to, you know, be run by the same person. So I don't anticipate that happening unless we see something like moving farther into August and still hearing nothing from the DOE about building safety. Unless we hear promises that aren't met, like we're going to have hand washing stations and they aren't there, or there's no PPE delivered on a certain date, then I think you'll see a call for the teachers to boycott or not show up. And I think we'd feel the same way. We'd go all remote if we couldn't keep the building safe.
I have a question, just from a parent's point of view. Right now, we are heavily leaning towards being remote only for both Morgan and Anthony for several reasons. However, if someone chose to be remote only and then needed to have their child come in, because like right now, I'm still working from home and I anticipate still working from home for some time. But if that was to change and needed to change your schedule, or vice versa, someone is doing the blended learning and then needs to just go to full remote, how would that be handled?
So I think two things. We don't have an exact process in place for that yet, but we will. The DOE told us that there's going to be a schedule for parents, you know, every 3 months or something. So we would do something like that. But if there's an emergency or something urgent happens, we'll have to also put in place a process for exceptions. So we wouldn't just let anybody do whatever they want anytime, because that's chaos. But if, you know, maybe an administrator like myself or one of the APs would have to approve it so that we can have a conversation and say, oh, you had a work situation change, or you had, you know, something happen in your family that you need to send the kids back in, and to be able to have a conversation with that. That's off schedule.
Yeah, with the caveat to that is that we have to stay within the CDC guidelines. So if an emergency came up, but we were at capacity for what's safe in the classrooms, we could do it sooner than 3 months, but that would require a change in the enrollment to make that happen.
I think Marie had a question in the chat, Steve.
Is the in-person school day shorter, given that there'll be no art classes, gym classes, and such? So 2 questions. Let's start with that one. Is the remote day shorter? Aviva, you've been obsessing over the schedule, so maybe you can answer that one. I mean, I think generally, yes, because they're not with us all day. There are more breaks built in, but why don't you address that question?
Yeah, so the remote day, if children are remote, it is definitely a shorter day. We're prioritizing academic blocks, but again, the hours that would normally be put in for in-person, for example, if a math block is supposed to be, let's say, close to an hour and a half in person, like a full block, on remote, it's going to be anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes because of, like, you know, Zoom fatigue and other reasons, and needing for all kids and adults to have breaks from the computer and also to be doing their own independent work, not while on the computer. And so the way that the remote schedule is currently set up is that we ramped it up, as opposed to, I think I spoke to a couple of board members about this, but versus the spring remote plan, we are starting the remote in the current school year earlier. So we started at 9:30 a.m. when we were remote in the spring, but we are starting at 9 a.m., a half hour earlier, which gives us more time to have more academic blocks. Also understanding the developmental needs of some of our pre-K, K, and first graders, which will look different than, let's say, grades 2 and above. So it is a shorter day. And then when children are in person, we're still trying to figure out the logistics of who's covering what, because teachers who are on site need to have their 45-minute prep, their 45-minute lunch break. Like, we have to make sure that everybody, all adults, get that break on site. And of course, kids need to have their lunch breaks and their breaks from class too. So we're trying to, in the on-campus plan, again, prioritize academic blocks and work of play blocks that normally wouldn't be provided in that like in-person way because they're going to be remote. And so when they're on site, for example, someone might not have, let's say, science with Miss Jen on site like they would normally have, because we're prioritizing, you know, that 45-minute time is going to be with someone who can cover, because Miss Jen's schedule is packed and she also needs lunch break. So we're just trying to figure out, ultimately, every classroom having time for them to eat lunch, have their recess, whatever that looks like, and for all teachers to have their appropriate breaks too. So not everybody on site is going to be having specials and enrichment in the way that it usually is, but when they're off site, everyone is for sure going to have a block of specials, so that will be incorporated into the remote plan. So when you're remote the following week, you will 100% get a special if you don't get it in person.
Maria, if it doesn't answer your question, let us know. You also said, are we solely reaching for District 3 students in person, or also those in the Bronx? I think the implication is anybody who's on the, you know, the school's rules can come on campus for that week A, week B rotation. There is a challenge where we don't know if the school buses are running, and we can't control that unless we invest, you know, 5% of our budget into school buses. We believe the DOE will definitely do special education busing, which is a narrow portion of our special education students get busing as a service on their IP. But gen ed busing is up in the air right now, and the DOE is being very quiet about it. I think logistically, getting it restarted will be very hard. They may have lost a lot of drivers to other jobs and so on. So if there's no bus, that's going to make things a lot harder for many of our families, because half our kids ride the bus. And those aren't the Bronx families. Those are the families who mostly live uptown, and some in East Harlem, West Harlem. So we are opening up the on-campus learning for everybody. The kids in the Bronx might actually have more access, because if the bus isn't running, than the kids in uptown. They're used to having their kids come to school through the subway or whatever. But we also know the subway is one of the big complications of this whole plan. And if the subway isn't clean, isn't safe, and is packed, then we're going to quickly end up with an outbreak somewhere and go remote. So Maria, if that doesn't answer your question, then let us know. Other questions?
I have a question, and I think also maybe a sentiment to share. I know this is a little bit further down the lane, and we're focusing obviously on the pods and support for teachers, but I am curious if we're going to have any sort of training or support for whichever set of the administrative and student support teams are going to be on site to kind of navigate the policy and changing health concerns with families, and also to kind of not police about masks or whatever the health restrictions are, but to really guide that. Because I imagine just a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty and stress for families and staff. And I want to know, I would guess if that's part of the plan, that we're going to be ready to have those conversations with families.
I think you're talking about how to make sure that kids have their masks on, they're wearing them consistently and that sort of thing, and follow all the other guidance. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think all kind of the different scenarios and scheduling and changes that would happen from when a student, is on 111th Street all the way, arriving in the morning, all the way up to us dismissing them in the afternoon. Not even just in the classroom, but what pullouts look like, what recess looks like, busing, just the expectations that we're reinforcing with families and with the students directly, and how we can handle that in an appropriate but consistent way as staff.
The good news is that the state guidance is not entirely, but pretty comprehensive in asking all these questions. So we've at least had to start thinking about them. I think the planning is not the hard part. I think the consistency will be the hard part. Things like kids wearing masks and having appropriate mask breaks and being able to keep them on. One of our APs mentioned that his son chewed through two 2 masks because he just had a nervous habit of biting on it, you know, so that's not going to be helpful if we end up having a lot of those cases, and these cloth masks don't work very well because of that. The most troubling thing for me is not being able to coordinate with the DOE and the building council, because it's all dependent on us having clear use of the common spaces and being able to know that we can stagger because the cafeteria won't be used by the other school at this time. And that's been impossible so far, because since July, I think late June, I've been reaching out to try and meet over the summer and get together, and they've rightfully said we just don't have enough information to meet. There's no point in us meeting because we're waiting. So the question you started with was training. The plan does actually ask us, you know, how will you train staff? So much of our summer institute time will be spent, you know, not all of it, of course, we have academic work to worry about, but a lot of it will be spent on going over these routines and protocols, what to look for, not to look for, what the test case for sending a child home. How are we going to move through the building? What does social distancing for families look like when they're picking up students, and so on. So all those routines will be micro planned out.
Steve, just to add, Alejandro and I were planning to answer some of Ashley's question, and then I was talking to Christina Ferrer about this as well. We were planning on having family summits across pre-K to 5 during the time basically when we would be having the family interviews. There would also be time blocks for families to join a Zoom call with the assistant principal and other members of administration on a Zoom call to go over expectations for this year, you know, even with like a partial plan, a blended model, or just fully remote, just going over key logistics, you know, answering questions and like kind of having that format for people to know the new expectations, because this year obviously comes with new expectations. One idea that Christina Ferrer had to support some of our families who are multi-language learners is, rather than having them attend a session where it'd be English only, we would have a lower grade and an upper grade session for our Arabic speaking families, French speaking, Spanish speaking. And so it would be across a couple of grades, but be spoken in their language. That way it's accessible to them, and that it's not this dual back and forth between translations, so that we would have established times for our multi-language learner families as well. And this was kind of the intention for something that we've been over the summer planning, but need to ramp up depending on what the official model is. But that could also help answering Ashley's question about expectations, so that parents and guardians are aware of like what are the new academic expectations this year, safety expectations, and so forth.
Aviva, I appreciate that, and I think that that's helpful. I think my additional layer and concern is, having seen some of the family response data, knowing that we have some families that are just don't think that some of the restrictions and guidelines are necessary for us to be put in place. And I'm worrying, as someone who has experienced it certainly in other schools and not in a pandemic, but just engaging those families and making sure that we can have either the more difficult conversations around maybe belief in use of masks, or more so that there is a clear pipeline of who to escalate that concern to, that, you know, they could talk to somebody on site, or they can get on a Zoom call with a member of the leadership team, because I don't expect that to be the norm, but I do foresee that as a potential option or potential hiccup for us. So I guess want to speak that into this planning conversation to make sure that that's covered.
Yeah, I think in any setting, you're going to have to set boundaries and reinforce them. And this is as high stakes as it gets, because this is about health and safety. It's literally life or death for some people who might catch this disease. So I am as clear as we can be that if you're going to be on campus, this is the requirement. And if you're not invested in that, for whatever reason, you know, we're not going to try and convince you that masks save lives, but you can't come on campus. And we do have authority to say that based on the plan that we've been looking at from the state guidelines. No shoes, no shirt, no service.
And that will be done up front, I assume, as part of the general dissemination of information to parents.
Well, 2 things. I think that the format that Aviva talked about is going to be really powerful. We only had one town hall in the spring, and it was well attended, and it took a long time for us to get it going. If we had done that earlier, I think we would have had an even better reception because people appreciate the in-person, explanation of things. And the second thing is we're also going to work with the kids. So the first 6 weeks of any school year are about routine setting, and students respond to rules that they are invested in, they understand, they help generate. So we don't want to scare anyone, but we're going to talk to the kids about the reason for these routines and the reason for these masks, and how hard it was to be at home and not see their friends. And if we're all in this together. If we're going to try and get back to normal, we need to do these X, Y, and Z things. And I think that in a developmentally appropriate manner, that will gather student investment too, and they'll influence their parents.
Go ahead, please. Go on, Steve.
Okay, so let's go on to let's get real. And what that means is this might not work at all. We may need to start the year remote. Several charter schools have already said they're starting remote. Worried about buses, worried about the building, worried about the subways. Many charters have said, we'll take a few weeks, we'll do all remote, and we'll plan for a possible late September opening, a possible mid-September, October opening of doing this hybrid plan. We, as a school management team, haven't come to that decision at this point, but we may come to that decision, and I want to air some of the debate right now and hear board members participate, and also make sure that we have board blessing to make those decisions based on the data, and that we can put that in the minutes of this meeting, that the board understands the challenges and has given the school leaders the authority to decide whether to open remotely under the governor's guidance or follow the blended plan that we came up with.
Will you be making a formal resolution for this to know that we can act on it?
Yeah, why don't we have the discussion, then I can draft a resolution.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I named all the parameters: buses, building safety. I didn't mention parent choice. We're still analyzing this data. We don't have 100% of the data points in, but we want to respect families' needs, and we may find that a vanishingly few number of families are serious about being on site because they need to and they'd rather not, that sort of thing. So what do people think? As trustees, first, do you have a gut feeling where you just are saying there's no way that we should be on campus at all? Do you feel, I hope you don't say this, but well, the president says we should reopen, so let's reopen at all costs. But what are people's thoughts?
It's not that. I mean, I think that the name of the game here is being agile. So I'm in support of the systems and mechanisms that support the most agility, taking into account the wellness of everyone in our community. And so, I think the school leadership is best positioned to determine those things. And, I'm more interested in seeing the structures that do support the ability to be agile in a very ever-changing situation. And I think that's what I've been seeing thus far. So
I would 100% agree with Brandy. I'm sitting here with my 2 9-year-old grandchildren. They're actually going to art class with face masks. That's the whole thing we're doing right now. Anyway, getting them out of the house, getting with other kids is a very high priority, but it's not as high a priority as safety. And I know Steve and Margaret and your colleagues well enough to know that safety is always, even before this came around, safety was always on the tip of your lip, tip of your tongue. And everything I've heard now is I'm in accord with.
I'll echo both Brandy and Peter. I think we should move forward, but also be flexible.
Anybody from the staff want to chime in with comments? Oh, sorry, Vorka, go ahead.
That's okay. I apologize. I missed some of the beginning of the meeting, but I do think that safety should come first, should be child-centered. and so if you think it needs a slower roll in, some sort of, new model of whatever to get the desired results and keep everyone safe, then I'm all on board for that. I would just suggest that, when it comes to doing any sort of assessment, then maybe that would be the time when you want to be face to face so that you could see the kids, assess them for their health needs and any academic needs if that's, if you deem that that's really necessary. But that's the only thing I would suggest for in person.
And if I can say, I'm in favor of the blending model. And I think it's really important that the kids be able to interact, and they're learning, elbow bumps and no high fives and things like that. They've seen and been hearing how to do certain things. So they know, and they know that safety is one of our key things at our school. And I think it's important that they be able to do virtual as well as, in class, because it seems to be a new trend now.
I think the one thing that I would add is from what I'm hearing from the board, the agility is important and the discretion of school management is trusted, which we appreciate very much. To be transparent in this conversation, we are struggling as to whether or not we can and should open for on-campus learning in the blended model as early as September 2nd because of the uncertainty with the Department of Education at this time. So there is definitely chatter on the table if that's even possible, or if we need to start remote and open a bit later in September when there's more clarity around when we can even get into the building. And it seems like it's a growing sentiment among charters, particularly ones that are co-located, but some that are even not co-located, they're holding off to see what happens with a grand opening with more movement on public transportation and such. School busing is also very, very unclear. And I know that Steve said we will most likely have special ed busing. I hope that is the case, but the DOE stance as of last Thursday was, we're not sure. We don't have any information about that. So there's a complete lack of clarity right now. So that's something that we're talking about on the table, is that we may have to, or feel that it's the best thing for the community to start remote, start on time, September 2nd, but start fully remote.
Well, I think it's clear from what you've heard from the three board members, you've heard from others, the four board members, please others chime in if you would like to. We trust you to make that kind of judgment. We're available to you on either the executive committee level or the full board level, whichever seems more appropriate, as you may need us. And one question I have, and Laura may be able to help here too, and I suspect I know the answer, but is there anything the board can do individually or as a group to sort of poke the DOE into some sort of decisions?
And I would just add on to that before you respond, Steve. We talked about it in the executive committee. Did we have a volunteer consultant to help us, excuse me, with the public health aspects of this and safe opening aspects of it? And do we still need someone?
Yes, I think that would be super helpful, because we're putting all these things down on paper, and I'm hearing, well, plexiglass isn't useful, and parent emailed over the weekend saying, can we do plexiglass? So we don't have all the answers to these things. The CDC guidelines are pretty clear, but they're not super comprehensive. Pete, the original question was, can the board do anything to put pressure on the DOE? I think that's a very political question. We want to be, I think, really thoughtful and judicious here. I have a suspicion that part of the reason that Success made this big statement that they're opening remotely is because they want to smack around the DOE and say, well, the DOE isn't doing enough to open buildings up, so we're not, you know, and maybe that's misguided suspicion, but I don't see a reason to poke the bear. I trust that the DOE is doing as much as they can and going as fast as they can. This is a really complicated problem that they have, 1.1 million kids to worry about, plus all the co-located schools, plus any other services they provide to non-public schools. So I trust they're trying as hard as they can, and we need to just make a decision about when we draw a line and say, we just can't wait any longer, and we're going to make our own call, or you know, there are X, Y, and Z things that we need, and if we don't get those, we have to do something differently. I don't think we're going to do anything to make the DOE act differently, is my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. Laura, you concur in that?
Yeah, I mean, there, you know, just even throughout remote learning, it's been kind of fascinating to see how every decision requires like the sign off from like 30 different people, including UFT and all, just like so many different stakeholders. So, you know, I know they're working on it. There are just so many unknowns, and but I know that they're thinking about all this. I know they're having conversations. I put in the chat the link to participate in the family engagement session tomorrow. There are 2 others this summer, and so that will be really the best place to get the most up to excuse me, up to date information on any back to school plans. I do know though that I think even Mayor de Blasio mentioned the other day that he is even saying that plans could change into August. So I think everyone internally is also trying to be very nimble.
Also, Steve, what about Ken's suggestion of a medical or a health consultant?
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
Okay, I'll reach out to mailman today.
Thank you, Ken.
We don't need a mailman, Kev. Ken, we need a doctor. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Okay, I have a proposed resolution here. I'm going to put it in the chat and I'll read it. The board resolves to support the school leadership's blended learning-based school reopening plan, giving the school leadership the authority to open with a remote-only plan based on safety concerns if necessary.
Steve, can I ask a question? Have you thought about outdoor classrooms?
Thought about it, yes. Planned it, no. Every time I even start thinking about it, I just picture the rain and the wind and then having to quickly reschedule and redo things. So there's been a push by parents to have the mayor close down streets and hold classes in parks. And for me, you know, it's not realistic. You know, we can use it as a resource, but there just isn't enough space and there isn't a rain covering, and it could rain anytime. And then what do you do? So that's my thought.
My daughter, the mother of the 2 9-year-olds, rails about once a day about, well, we could get Bloomberg to put up tents over every playground and every side street in the city, but that doesn't take into account the wind, and it is hurricane season. Anyhow.
I mean, I think we have that lovely garden area, and I think it could be that we could build into the plan the protocols for using that. But I think that, you know, like what kind of people are talking about, I don't think that outdoor classrooms in the Northeast is a long-term solution because of the weather. You know, weather changes, it gets colder. So it's hard to rely on that as a permanent solution for seats for classrooms. We can't add more kids and add more cohorts because it's a very volatile solution because it can change at any moment.
Well, we could also get Bloomberg to install heaters, and then we could open a bar at night and make money to pay for the heaters.
And sanitize a couple of hours before school opens.
I think I've led the conversation off.
So that's how the board can help. They can run the bar at night. Okay.
Steve, if we put us back on track, please.
Okay, so wordsmithing, thoughts about this proposal before we can vote.
The family maintain proposal?
The resolution is in the chat.
Oh.
So the board resolves to support the school leadership's blended learning school learning-based school reopening plan, giving the school leadership the authority to open with a remote-only plan based on safety concerns if necessary.
I think it's the most
okay,
adjectives and qualifiers I've ever written in one sentence.
Yeah. I might wordsmith just this concept of safety concerns, because it may be a more holistic variety of concerns, like busing, all sorts of things that may call for the necessity. So other than that, I think it reads well.
Mm-hmm. Did I see Edward on here? Trying to get my other lawyer to look at this. I guess he's not there.
Randy, what about logistical? That would encompass.
Yeah, I think the safety and logistical, I think that's a really good suggestion.
Edward's back. You want to answer your question? You want to ask your question again?
Edward,
I agree with that. I agree. Sorry, guys. I agree with changing the language to getting safety and logistics. Because safety is a little bit of an amorphous term, but we all know what we're trying to get at.
Yes, I think that's fine.
So you can't do Zoom when you're in an outdoor classroom.
Or an underwater classroom, it sounds like. So I move that the proposal as modified be accepted by the board. Any seconds?
Second.
Any objections?
Objection.
Okay, done.
Okay,
I
thank you.
do want to add
ahead.
one other piece from our earlier question. An earlier question. So a survey did go out to all school-based staff, including teachers, to ask if they had any accommodations. They'd have to show proof, and so that survey was due by July 31st. So I think that there are a lot of decisions that are on hold because of that, because they want to see how many teachers are available to be in a building versus remote. So I think in August, once they get the results back from that survey, and from what I understand, the survey results are still fairly low. So I think that will also change course, could potentially change course if a lot of teachers and school-based staff are saying they can't be in the building.
Yeah.
Maybe teachers are waiting for the DOE to make announcements about what they're doing for safety before they answer, and the DOE
yeah, exactly.
results.
It's just
circle.
Yeah. Aviva's idea was to have multiple surveys, the same survey, and keep giving it. And I think as things take shape, that actually makes a lot of sense. If the DOE did that, they might be able to be iterative with their plan.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to reiterate one point, that we have passed this resolution and we mean it, but we also we want to know about stuff. So if as when we decide to close down and stuff, if you engage the board quickly on any case of sweeping change, please do so. In fact, I demand that you do so.
Well,
we will do it very covertly and very secretively for moving forward.
Do we have a vote to approve the resolution? I don't think we did that.
We did. We did.
Okay.
We had no objections.
No objections. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We'll do the regular email updates just as things shift, and they will shift. And then if there's something imminent happening, we'll pull together an executive committee call right away or send out a blast to the full board.
Thank you.
Okay, two other things are finances and enrollment, to be pretty quick with those. So finances, Doug, you were on the call. You're still there. I let the board know about the PPP application and about the CARES Act. If you could just briefly describe those and just give us an oral report on the school's finances right now.
Okay. For the CARES Act, we've been approved. It may be in our account now or tomorrow. It's, if I recall the amount, like $1.1 million. We're going to use it exclusively for payroll. with the idea of it will be forgiven over maybe a 5-year period. All of this stuff is still rolling out to be new, so we're not 100% sure, but we are approved. As far as the CARES Act, I don't have much to...
Can I interrupt? If you do use it all for payroll, that means it would be then considered a grant. Is that correct?
That is the idea. I don't want to commit to one specific statement because no one knows at all at this point, like 100%. So I'm on a call with maybe like 100 different other charter schools and nonprofits, and that's the assumption. We use it for payroll to support, to keep our staff in place. Possibly, there's a strong possibility over the next 5 years it will be forgiven. I'm not 100% sure if it will be forgiven in stages, like 20%, 20%, and then we zero out. But that's the goal. So
before it's forgiven, do you have to start paying it back?
No, not yet. And we have 24 weeks to use it. The goal is to get it out and used as fast as possible. So based on my calculations, in the next 3 months, we should be done.
Oh, okay.
To use it all outside of the money, you can't double dip. So we have other monies that attach to our payroll. So I'll once I have it, once I'm like 100% sure everything, it will be on the finance report, and I'll show everyone where it will show up. It will not show up in our, at this point, it will not show up in our revenues. It'll show up more of on our liabilities until it's forgiven and we will draw down and place it where it needs to go.
It'll be on our balance sheet, so that's good.
Exactly. Okay. So
you'll let the finance committee know this as soon as you have it in hand, please.
Yes, we just got approved Friday, was it, Steve? Or somewhere there.
Friday.
So, yeah. I haven't formally let the committee know. I talked to Barrett on our last call, and he recommended it, and we were in it as well. As far as the CARES Act, I haven't gotten to that part yet because we're also closing out the books for the school year. But that is the next task to go, and we have to see how it translates over for us as a charter versus how the DOE gets it. So we will know a little bit more in the next coming days and week or two. As far as our finances, we're still strong. I'm proud to say that we're watching our spending like to the brown cent. So it's overall it's good, and I didn't have a report to like really report on anything major, but we're still financially strong, and kind of it as a nutshell.
Thank you.
Just to summarize and say a couple more things about those two pots of money. So the CARES Act is a grant, and that is on the order of the Title I funding. So it's in the six figures. It's 100-something thousand, 170,000, I believe. And that is a grant, and that comes from the first round of legislation from Congress about the pandemic. And that's a welcome relief. It does give us the ability to buy PPE without worrying about the hit to our bottom line. It does give us a cushion where our budget was basically a zero budget with no surplus. So that's helpful on one level. The payroll protection program is the $1.1 million, and that is really insurance against catastrophe. So none of this makes our financial situation rosy, but it's all like more stopgap against the possible big budget cuts that might be looming that the governor told us about, and it also shores up any other catastrophic things that may happen. So the governor has not made any announcements about the promised cuts. I think I put that in the email to the board too. 5%, 10%, 50%, 20% are the options, or zero. Unless the feds come through with a congressional act to support state budget shortfalls. The deadlines were, I believe it was end of April, end of June, and end of December. So the first two deadlines passed, and there's been no word. So we take that as good news. There still may be a big mid-year cut coming after December 31st. But by then, we'll have been received, half our dollars, and I hope they wouldn't claw back and go backwards because we spent that money already. So we feel that we're on the best possible financial footing right now, yet that best possible footing is still uncertain and frightening, and so we're being super cautious, as Doug mentioned. That takes us to enrollment, our last topic. Enrollment is not looking great. The numbers have not improved. We are similar to where we were in about June of last year, and we're now in July. So I'm concerned that we're not seeing growth. The team is active, and there are steps being taken to improve enrollment. Our authorizer said last week that they're seeing this as an issue across schools where people seem less willing to move to a new school. I'm not sure how that affects people leaving our school. We haven't seen a lot of kids leave our school, but we've seen a lot of kids graduate, of course, and we're trying to fill those early childhood seats. Early childhood is where most of our vacancies are. So if anybody has any additional comments who's been working on enrollment, and many people in this call have been, please chime in. But that's just an update, and I will provide more information as we go.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing that immediately jumps out at me is because of the lack of clarity around busing, and given the sort of wider range of neighborhoods that our school draws from than maybe some other schools, that it really could be a significant issue, and just sort of thinking through that.
Yeah, I agree. Maria asked a question that's enrollment related. How are uniforms working? Are children required to wear uniforms during virtual sessions? No, they have not been, but we still are requiring families to purchase a uniform at a very discounted cost so they have something, and we've promised them that if they don't use it because we are all remote or they're all remote for X amount of time period, they can at no cost upgrade to a bigger size as the kids grow. One day we'll need that uniform in school, all of us. Some sweet day, like magic, it'll happen.
I think Doug's too big for it.
Mm-hmm. Just on the enrollment front, just for further clarity, the state and the authorizers on calls in the last week did say that they anticipate that there will be a need to go outside the 20% attendance requirement, and that there would have to be some kind of flexibility and variability. And they of course did not tell schools to curb any aggressive enrollment tactics. Like we need to keep going with our attendance. But they just, because of the unknown, a lot of schools just have a lot of question marks about, once the first day of school hits, what are the seats actually going to look like? So they're just being preemptive in saying that there may very well be this year, because of so many unknowns, a flexibility that's needed. But again, we do need to continue our enrollment efforts far and wide.
Yeah, I don't think this should lower our expectations or our target. It's just we hear other people sharing some of the same problems. But just to clarify, you said attendance, but you meant enrollment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant enrollment.
And what the 20% is, I've always heard it as 15%, and we've never had a problem with it, so we've never had to look it up and worry about it. But the charter law, or maybe our authorizers guidelines, require us to stay 15% above or below our chartered number. Our chartered number is 500 or around there. So 20% would be as low as 400, which we project right now. 20% under, 15% under would be a bit more than that. So like 425
Susie Carrillo on the call, she said 20. So unless she misspoke, and we should clarify that, she definitely said 20.
And what do they do to you if you don't meet the 20?
It's a serious conversation about viability of the charter.
Okay.
Every school, that's one of the measurements that every school needs to report during renewal time about enrollment.
It's more about renewal than anything else.
Okay.
But there have been schools that have, it's very few, but they have shut down a couple of schools that have had low enrollment, and they use that percentage as a trigger to take a closer look.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Shut down early, yeah.
And what's going on now in the way of recruitment?
Multi-pronged. We're doing a lot of social media work. We're trying to ramp up the word of mouth campaign. We've got a database of organizations, places to go to spread the word, and put together some materials to have people post in their networks. We've also brought on Eugene Campbell, who had been doing after school work for us, to do some of the canvassing work, such as it's possible in pandemic times. I think that sums it up, unless anybody wants to add anything.
I can add to that.
Yeah.
I think I've been attending the weekly meetings with the team. They've actually, I think, doing a little bit more. There's a new marketing campaign. It's a little bit more focused, thinking about who they're marketing to. And then we're also going to see if we can get some connections with some of the local schools that have high wait lists, to see if we can partner with them to get referrals for, the kids in their pre-K to K, K and 1 wait lists.
Thank you, Boyka. Anyone else? Monica, you still here?
Yes, I'm still here.
Do you have anything to add, or do you think we covered it?
I think you guys covered it. I must say, even the email that Steve sent Saturday pretty much covered everything I had ideas about. Enrollment is something that I am constantly thinking about. I just wanted to share that I do get flyers in my mail still from other charter schools in the area. So, and that was it kind of caught me off guard, I must say, but I guess, they're still, whatever efforts they have, they're still attempting. So it shows that other charters are also having the same issues that we are having. And you say early education, so that is the pre-K and kindergarten classes for the most part, or?
I would say K1, 2 more than pre-K.
Oh, okay.
I mean, pre-K,
K1,
there's
2.
uncertainty there because it's your first time in school, and you're going to take the leap now. But the numbers are showing up in K1 and 2 more than in other grades.
That's
obviously keep working at it, please.
Okay, other than that, I want to thank the board for all of the support and attention, mailmen and otherwise. And
get a shave, Steve. Will you come on?
I'm scheduled to shave tomorrow.
An executive meeting?
We're not going to have that.
Oh, executive session? No, we're not doing that. Yeah, that's changing. Things are changing rapidly, John.
Okay, because John Barrett asked me to bring up something because I spoke to him on Friday for about 20 minutes.
Yes.
I think maybe that is a conversation we're not going to have today. We'll punt that to another time. We want John to be on the call when we can have an executive session.
Yes.
Okay.
John, if you want to talk to me about it directly, just give me a buzz.
Okay, I will.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I move that we adjourn. Any seconds?
Second.
Any objections? Thank you all. Have a nice day. Be safe.
Bye, guys. Miss you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good day.